Good afternoon, Center of Hope, your friendly neighborhood chaplain coming to you again today with another devotional video. You may find that Dean and I are going to be doing a few more videos than we normally do over the next few weeks, as we are not going to be doing our regular rounds. You've probably seen the email about that already. So be prepared for some more videos. Today, what I'd like to do is talk about putting on a new identity, a new set of clothing, as it were, that will help us to be able to respond to people regardless of the situation that they are going through. And isn't that the way it is? Oftentimes we struggle to respond well sometimes because people behave in a way we have no idea what's going on with their lives, but they do something offensive or something hurtful, and we don't always respond the way that we need to. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about some things that will help us to respond differently, some character traits, some virtues, as it were, that the Apostle Paul wants to share with us about that. I'm going to start off by reading a story by Stephen Covey, who was, some of you may know, the author of 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So if you would just give me a couple minutes to share this story, and then I'll make some comments on it afterwards. So this is what he says. He says, I remember a mini paradigm shift I experienced one Sunday morning on a subway in New York. People were sitting quietly, some reading newspapers, some lost in thought, some resting with their eyes closed. It was a calm, peaceful scene. Then, suddenly, a man and his children entered the subway car. The children were so loud and rambunctious that they instantly changed the whole climate. The man sat down next to me and closed his eyes, apparently oblivious to the situation. The children were yelling back and forth and throwing things, even grabbing people's papers. It was very disturbing, and yet the man sitting next to me did nothing. It was difficult not to feel irritated. I could not believe that he could be so insensitive as to let his children run wild like that and do nothing about it, taking no responsibility at all. It was easy to see that everyone else on the subway felt irritated too. So finally, with what I felt like was unusual patience and restraint, I turned to him and said, "Sir, your children are really disturbing a lot of people. I wonder if you couldn't control them a little more." The man then lifted his gaze, as if to come to a consciousness of the situation for the first time, and he said softly, "Oh, you're right. I guess I should do something about that. We just came from the hospital where their mother died about an hour ago. I don't know what to think, and I guess they don't know how to handle it either." Can you imagine what I felt at that moment? My paradigm shifted. Suddenly, I saw things differently. And because I saw things differently, I thought differently. I felt differently. I behaved differently. My irritation vanished. I didn't have to worry about controlling my attitude or my behavior. My heart was filled with the man's pain. Feelings of sympathy and compassion flowed freely. "Your wife just died? Oh, I'm so sorry. Can you tell me about it? What can I do to help?" Everything changed in an instant. I can't say that I've had an experience quite like this one, but I have had experiences where people's behavior was not what it should have been. They were doing something offensive. They were saying something that wasn't particularly nice, whatever it was. And I instantaneously, because I was offended or hurt, I responded in a way that certainly didn't help their situation and certainly wasn't appropriate for what they were dealing with. And so today, what I want to do is I want to read for you a few verses from the letter that Paul wrote to the church in Colossae. And this is from Colossians chapter 3, verse 12 and 13, where he says this: "Put on then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive." When I began to think about this story that Stephen told, or today, the one that I read to you, I began to think about this passage and how if we put on a different set of clothing when we get up in the morning, a set of clothing that would help us to see people differently and to respond differently, how might we be able to help other people? How might their lives and their situations change? So let's take a couple minutes just to talk about what the Apostle Paul says here. First of all, he says, put on then. He's telling them to clothe themselves in something. Actually, the Greek word that he uses there has the idea with it that you could be talking about putting on a shirt or putting on a pair of pants or a pair of shoes. But it can be used figuratively as well. And that's the way he's using it here, because, you can't literally put on a compassionate heart or kindness or humility or any of these things. So he's actually telling us to put on a different identity, put on something different than what we would just put on regularly. We're to gird ourselves with something different. I once had a prof in school at Tyndale when I was doing my bachelor's degree, who had us reading through Paul's letter to the Ephesians, and where they're told to put on the full armor of God, and what she actually had us do every day as part of our work was to act like we were putting on all of the parts of the armor of God, to figuratively do it by pretending we were putting on a breastplate and pretending we were putting on a helmet. And it's the same type of idea. We are to put this stuff on, but we're to make a conscious effort to do it. And what does Paul tell us to put on? Well, he tells us to put on a number of things. Number one, he says, put on compassionate hearts. Well, what does it mean to have a compassionate heart? What it means is that we're to have an emotional connection, a caring type of connection or relationship with those whose lives are hurt and broken. Are we emotionally connected to where people are at? Or are we just seeing the behavior and responding to that? If we look a little deeper, what can we see that's going on in that person's life that we can connect with, that might actually shift the situation for them? Paul also says we're to put on kindness. Well, what is kindness? Kindness is the readiness to do good. It's about being prepared when the moment comes to act in a way that is good and helpful to somebody else. Now, that may be something that they deserve, and oftentimes it's going to be something that they don't deserve. Either way, we want to be ready to do good, to be kind in every situation. The Apostle Paul here also tells people to be covered or clothed in humility. Well, humility is one of those words that gets used in a lot of different ways. And I think what we need to understand here is the humility that the Apostle Paul is talking about is really about being a servant. So in these situations where a person is acting out, saying something mean, acting in a way that's offensive and hurtful to us, we need to ask ourselves the question in that moment, if we clothe ourselves in humility, what does it mean to serve them? How can I serve them? How can I show them love in a very practical manner? And then Paul says a couple of other things. He says that we are to put on meekness, also known as gentleness. When we respond, we need to do it in a way that is not forceful, a way that doesn't put them in a corner, a way that encourages a change in their life without forcing them to do it. And the last couple of things that I think we need to talk about here, Paul says that we're to put on patience and that we're to bear with someone. And patience is really about taking the long road with a person, knowing that their own hurt and pain is not going to be something that's overcome in just a few minutes or maybe even a few months or a few years. But they're here with us right now. Can we decide to walk with them for as long as God gives in a way that is patient, in a way that bears with their hurt and pain and the things that they might say to us or do to us that hurt? And then Paul says one last thing. He says, we need to forgive. And we need to forgive in the same way that God forgave us, which is to forgive everything. In the way that we have been forgiven, so we are to forgive. And so I ask you the question today. What is it you put on every day? Do you put on your identity that is the one where we get offended and hurt by the things that people say and do, and so as a result we respond without grace and without mercy and compassion and kindness? Or are you putting on the compassionate heart, the kindness of God, the humility and servanthood of God, the gentleness of God, the patience of God, and are we forgiving? I think there's an opportunity for us to change the lives of people around us when we put on a new identity, a different set of clothing, and respond differently. Thanks for listening, guys. And if you have any questions, feel free to email us about them. If you have any comments, feel free to comment as well. Have a good day. We'll see you again soon. Thanks.